Everyone is watching the front lines, counting the tanks and the casualties, but they're looking at the wrong map. While the world is obsessed with who wins the next battle, I've spent months tracking a much quieter, much more calculated move being made behind the scenes. There is one nation and only one that has already secured a victory, regardless of which side signs a peace treaty or which border gets redrawn. Most analysts are too distracted by the headlines to see it, but once you notice the pattern, it's impossible to ignore. This isn't just about a war, it's about the final transition of global power, and the winner isn't who you think it is. To understand how we got here, you have to look at the massive vacuum this conflict created almost overnight. When the sanctions hit and the supply lines snapped, the West thought they were isolating a superpower. But from my perspective, all they really did was hand over a set of keys. I started noticing a shift in how energy and technology were flowing. It wasn't just a trade pivot, it was a total restructuring of dependency. While the world's traditional powers are draining their stockpiles and bleeding their economies to maintain the status quo, this specific player is sitting back, collecting discounted resources, and building a parallel financial system that the West can't touch. They aren't just surviving the chaos, they are the ones organizing it. I watched as the global market scrambled, but the real story was hidden in the fine print of new trade agreements. You see, while Washington and Brussels were busy patting themselves on the back for decoupling, they inadvertently forced a marriage of convenience that creates a massive, self-sustaining fortress in the East. I've been tracking the data, and the numbers are staggering. We are seeing a massive influx of raw materials, oil, gas, and minerals, flowing into one hungry economy at prices the rest of the world can only dream of. This isn't just a bargain, it's a massive industrial subsidy funded by the conflict itself. It's a brilliant, if ruthless, strategy. By remaining the neutral middleman, this nation has turned the global banking system's aggressive stance into their greatest opportunity. I noticed they aren't just buying resources, they are replacing the entire infrastructure of the opposition. Every time a Western brand pulls out or a tech giant cuts ties, a local alternative, backed by this dominant power, moves in to fill the void. They are essentially beta testing a world where the US dollar isn't the king anymore. I've looked at the digital currency trials and the cross-border payment systems they're rolling out right now. They aren't preparing for a seat at the table. They are building an entirely new room. The beauty of their position is that they don't need a military victory to win. If the war drags on, their competitors continue to deplete their treasuries and hollow out their industrial bases. If the war ends tomorrow, they emerge as the primary architect of the reconstruction, holding all the leverage over the energy and the logistics. They've managed to turn a global catastrophe into a massive, low-risk laboratory for their own rise. While the headlines focus on the roar of the jets, I'm focused on the silent hum of the factories and the steady click of the new digital Silk Road that is being paved as we speak. They have successfully offloaded the cost of the war to everyone else, while keeping 100% of the strategic dividends for themselves. I've spent a lot of time digging into the psychological side of this strategy, and what I found is a masterclass in patience that most Western leaders simply aren't equipped to handle. While our political cycles are defined by the next election or the next fiscal quarter, this power is playing a game of decades. I started looking into their internal discourse, and it's clear they view this conflict as a massive stress test for the West's resolve. They are watching every move, every hesitation, and every crack in the NATO alliance. To them, the battlefield isn't just a physical space, it's a data set. They are learning exactly how modern drones perform, how electronic warfare scales, and most importantly, how quickly Western public opinion begins to sour under the weight of inflation and high energy costs. What's truly chilling is how they've managed to weaponize the idea of neutrality. By refusing to take a definitive side, they've positioned themselves as the only adult in the room, the inevitable mediator that both sides will eventually have to crawl to when the fighting stops. I've been analyzing their diplomatic outreach across the global south, Africa, South America, and the Middle East. They are telling a very persuasive story. The West brings sanctions and chaos. We bring infrastructure and stability. And it's working. They are building a coalition of the unaligned that represents more than half of the world's population. This isn't just speculation. I've tracked the shipping routes and the deepwater port investments that have accelerated since the war began. They are securing the choke points of the future. While we are distracted by the tactical movements of a few miles of trench line, they are securing the lithium mines, the cobalt supplies, and the semiconductor pipelines that will dictate who runs the 21st century. They have effectively turned the entire conflict into a giant diversion. While the rest of the world is burning through its old world ammunition, this nation is stockpiling the new world intelligence and influence that will make traditional military might look obsolete. They are winning because they are the only ones who aren't actually fighting, yet they are the only ones whose influence grows with every bullet fired. I've been looking closely at the internal structural shifts that no one is talking about. The way this nation is basically future-proofing its entire economy, while the rest of the world is stuck in a 20th century mindset. When I looked at the investment flow, I saw something startling. They are aggressively decoupling their domestic technology from Western influence at a rate that shouldn't be possible. They took the fear of being the next target and turned it into a massive national mobilization. Every chip, every line of code, and every satellite link is being rebuilt to ensure that no matter what sanctions come their way in the future, they are completely immune. They are essentially building a dark economy that operates in parallel to the one we know. And this war provided the perfect excuse to accelerate that process without drawing too much scrutiny. It's almost like they are watching a fire in a neighbor's house, not to help or to hinder, but to study exactly how the wood burns and which walls collapse first. I noticed that while Western countries are struggling with internal polarization and debates over funding the front lines, this nation remains a monolith of singular purpose. They've watched the West weaponize the global financial system, and their takeaway wasn't to back down. It was to build a system where those weapons don't work anymore. I've spoken to experts who point out that by securing long-term, bottom-dollar energy contracts during this chaos, they have effectively guaranteed their industrial dominance for the next 30 years. They've lowered their manufacturing costs while everyone else's costs have skyrocketed. Think about the leverage that gives them. If you control the energy, the raw materials, and the alternative banking system, you don't need to fire a single shot to dominate your rivals. I'm seeing a world where the middle ground is no longer a vacuum, but a fortress. They are waiting for the moment of peak exhaustion, the moment when the West is tired of the bills and the East is tired of the blood. When that moment comes, they won't just be a participant in the peace talks, they will be the ones writing the terms of the new global order. They've managed to stay clean while the rest of the world gets covered in mud, and in the game of global power, the cleanest player usually walks away with the biggest prize. They aren't just surviving this transition, they are orchestrating the finale. I've been tracking the diplomatic fallout, and it's becoming clear that the most significant casualty of this war isn't a person or a piece of land. It's the Western-led moral authority. While I watch the traditional powers struggle to keep their narratives consistent, I noticed this silent winner doing something far more subtle. They are rewriting the rules of international legitimacy. They've realized that the old world is obsessed with ideological victories, while the new world cares about pragmatism and survival. By positioning themselves as the steady hand, the one power that doesn't lecture or judge, they've managed to pull an entire hemisphere into their orbit without ever having to demand it. I see it in the way they handle their debt and their infrastructure projects. They aren't just building bridges and ports, they are building a sense of inevitability. I've looked at the maps of the newest trade corridors, and they all lead back to one center. They've successfully convinced a huge portion of the globe that the era of Western dominance was just a temporary glitch in history, and that the natural order is now returning. This isn't just a political talking point, it's a reality that is being cemented in concrete and steel across 3 continents. While we are distracted by the noise of the headlines, they are making themselves indispensable to the global supply chain, ensuring that even their fiercest enemies can't afford to see them fail. The most profound realization I've had is that they have essentially turned time into a weapon. They aren't in a rush because they know that every day this conflict continues. The old system grows weaker and their new system grows more refined. They've essentially hollowed out the competition from the inside. They are watching as the traditional powers sacrifice their long-term economic health for short-term tactical gains. It's like watching a chess match where one player is focused on capturing a single pawn while the other player is quietly rearranging the entire board. They've already reached the endgame. They aren't waiting for the war to end to claim their prize. They've been collecting it in installments every single day since the first shot was fired. By the time the world realizes what has happened, the transition won't just be underway, it will be complete. I've spent the last few weeks looking at the cultural and intellectual shift that's accompanying this economic rise, and it's perhaps the most overlooked part of the entire puzzle. It's a shift in prestige. For a century, the world looked to the West for the blueprint of what a successful modern society looks like. But I've noticed that narrative is starting to crumble in real time. This silent victor is offering a different model, one that prioritizes order, technological surveillance, and collective growth over individual liberty and political debate. And as the West looks increasingly chaotic and divided, I'm seeing more and more nations look toward this alternative, not with fear, but with genuine curiosity. They've managed to turn their own stability into their greatest export. I've been analyzing their media influence and educational exchanges, and they are playing a very long game with the world's future leaders. They aren't just selling 5G towers and high-speed rail, they are selling a vision of a world where you don't have to choose between prosperity and security. By staying out of the dirty work of the current war, they've kept their reputation as the clean superpower intact. I see them hosting massive summits, inviting leaders from every corner of the globe, and the message is always the same. The old world is breaking, but we have already built the new one. The truly brilliant part is how they've handled the fallout of the global energy transition at the same time. While the West is paralyzed by the dilemma of moving away from fossil fuels while simultaneously needing them to win this war, this nation has simply done both. I've looked at the data. They are building more coal plants and more renewable energy than the rest of the world combined. They are making themselves energy independent on every front. They aren't just winning the war of today, they are winning the climate and resource war of tomorrow. They are essentially creating a closed-loop system where they provide the energy, the manufacturing, and the market. When I step back and look at the whole picture, it becomes clear that this wasn't a series of lucky breaks. It was a strategy of aggressive patience. They knew that the existing global order was brittle, and they simply waited for a crisis big enough to shatter it. This war was that crisis. Now, they are the only ones standing with the glue and the blueprints. While everyone else is arguing over who started the fire, they are already advertising the new building they've constructed on the lot next door. They have achieved the ultimate geopolitical feat. They've made themselves the destination for everyone who is tired of the struggle, and in doing so, they've ensured that no matter how the maps are redrawn in Europe, the capital of The world has already moved east. I started looking into the long-term demographic and social implications of this shift, and it's where the strategy becomes truly genius. While the West is facing a massive crisis of confidence, with populations divided and young people feeling more disconnected from their governments than ever, this rising power is doubling down on a narrative of national destiny. I've been observing how they've used this global instability to tighten their own internal unity. They aren't just watching the war, they are using it as a cautionary tale to show their citizens that Western-style freedom is synonymous with Western-style chaos. They've managed to turn the external conflict into a tool for internal domestic stability, creating a level of social cohesion that is becoming a rare commodity in the 21st century. What's even more fascinating is how they are handling the global brain drain. I've noticed a massive quiet migration of talent. As the West becomes more restrictive, expensive, and politically volatile, the winner is positioning itself as the new land of opportunity for the world's elite scientists, engineers, and researchers, specifically those from the unaligned world. They are building research hubs and smart cities that look like something out of a science fiction movie, all funded by the massive profits they've made from being the world's primary trade hub during this crisis. They are essentially harvesting the world's intellectual capital while the traditional powers are busy harvesting artillery shells. I've been looking at the maritime maps again, and the blue economy strategy they are implementing is breathtaking. They are securing fishing rights, deep-sea mining licenses, and naval checkpoints across the Indo-Pacific and the Arctic. While everyone else is bogged down in the mud of a land war in Europe, they are quietly claiming the oceans. They know that the future of human survival depends on the resources at the bottom of the sea, and they are making sure they own the tech to get there first. It's a total spectrum dominance that doesn't require a single declaration of war. By the time the dust settles on the current conflict, the world will wake up to find that the operating system of the planet has been updated. The currency, the internet protocols, the trade routes, and even the basic definitions of international law will have been shifted to suit their interests. They've essentially outweighted and outthought the competition. They aren't just the only ones winning. They are the only ones who seem to understand that the world as we knew it is never coming back. And they are the only ones who were ready with a replacement. They've successfully turned a period of global destruction into their own era of creation. I've been digging into the final layer of this transition, and it's the most subtle one yet, the death of the middleman. For decades, the global economy relied on Western institutions to act as the trusted brokers for everything: insurance, shipping standards, legal arbitration, and currency exchange. But I've noticed that this conflict has acted as a catalyst for a great bypassing. This rising power isn't just selling goods anymore, they are providing the entire ecosystem. They've launched their own global rating agencies and their own insurance conglomerates to cover the tankers that the West tried to blackball. They are essentially building a mirror world where the old rules simply don't apply, and they've invited everyone who's tired of being told what to do by Washington to join them. It's a masterstroke of leverage. I've been analyzing how they've used their massive hoard of foreign debt as a defensive shield. They've made it so that their economic collapse would mean the collapse of their rivals, effectively creating a financial mutually assured destruction. This gives them the freedom to operate with a level of boldness that no one else can match. While we talk about de-risking, they are realigning. I've seen reports of secret trade corridors being carved out through the mountains of Central Asia and the deserts of the Middle East, physical paths that are completely immune to naval blockades or Western sanctions. They are literally rewriting the geography of the planet to ensure that all roads lead back to them. But the most striking thing I've realized is the shift in how the world perceives the future. I've spent time looking at the global youth sentiment in the global south, and they aren't looking at the European front lines with fear. They are looking at the gleaming skyscrapers of the East with envy. This winner has successfully marketed the idea that the Western era was an era of consumption, while their era will be one of construction. They are winning the hearts and minds of the next generation of global leaders by simply being the ones who get things done while everyone else is arguing over the bill. They've played a perfect game of geopolitical jujitsu, using the West's own momentum and aggression against itself. Every sanction, every shipment of weapons, and every heated speech from a Western leader has only served to push the rest of the world closer to this new center of gravity. They didn't have to conquer the world. They just had to wait for the world to get tired of its old masters. As I see it, the war in Europe is just the closing credits of the old movie. The new one has already started, and the lead actor didn't even have to audition. They just bought the studio while no one was looking. They've secured a future where they are no longer just a participant in the global system, but the system itself. I started looking at the final, most permanent shift, the transition from physical power to algorithmic dominance. While the world is mesmerized by the sheer volume of steel and fire on the battlefield, I've been tracking the flow of data. This nation isn't just becoming the world's factory, they are becoming the world's brain. By remaining the sole major power with access to both Western markets and the forbidden data pools of sanctioned nations, they've managed to train their artificial intelligence on a scale that is simply impossible for anyone else. They are seeing the world through a lens that is clearer, faster, and more comprehensive than ours. They aren't just predicting the next move in the global economy, they are beginning to simulate it. I noticed that while Western tech giants are being dragged into political hearings and broken up by regulation, this silent winner is integrating its tech giants directly into the state's grand strategy. There is no friction between their corporate interests and their national interests. I've been analyzing their latest patents in telecommunications and quantum computing, fields that will define the next century, and the gap is widening. They are building a digital iron curtain, but this time, it's not to keep people in. It's to keep Western influence out while they export their high-tech governance to every other country on the map. They are selling the smart city of the future, which is really just a localized version of their own centralized control. The realization that hit me the hardest is that they have successfully decoupled themselves from the West's moral cycles. They don't care about being liked. They care about being necessary. I've seen this play out in real time as countries that were once staunch Western allies are now quietly opening accounts in Eastern banks and installing Eastern hardware in their government offices. They are doing this because they see which way the wind is blowing. They realize that the Western security umbrella is full of holes, while the Eastern economic engine is firing on all cylinders. This nation has managed to make its rise feel like an inevitable law of nature rather than a political choice. When you look at the total picture, it's clear that they've achieved what every empire in history has dreamed of. They've made their own survival the world's top priority. They've woven themselves into the fabric of human existence so deeply that you can't extract them without destroying yourself. While the combatants in the current war are fighting for the borders of the past, this nation has already claimed the borders of the future. They didn't need to win a war because they've already won the peace that follows it. They are the only ones who can truly say that the blood being spilled today is the foundation for their throne tomorrow. The game is over, and while we're still arguing over the score, they've already walked away with the trophy. I realize that we've been looking for the winner on the wrong side of the globe because we were taught that victory looks like a flag raised over a ruined city. But in this new era, victory doesn't roar, it whispers. It's the sound of a digital transaction that doesn't use the dollar. It's the hum of a factory that never lost its power supply. It's the silence of a nation that kept its sons at home while the rest of the world sent theirs to the slaughter. I looked at the final projections, and the truth is staggering. While the West is trapped in a loop of historical grievances, this power has moved into a future where the current war is just a footnote. They've successfully turned their rivals into their customers and their enemies into their dependents. They've built a world where you can't fight them without starving yourself, and you can't ignore them without falling behind. They didn't just survive the storm, they bought the wind. So, as I watch the news tonight, I don't see two sides fighting for a border. I see a world being dismantled and rebuilt in a different image. The greatest trick in geopolitical history wasn't winning a war, it was making sure that no matter who loses, you are the only one left standing to collect the debt. The ink on the peace treaty hasn't even dried yet, but the new master of the house has already moved in, changed the locks, and sent us the bill. The war isn't ending, it's being settled. And for the first time in a century, the terms aren't being written in English.